cabinet minister for information, and I tried to figure out how to deal with the many problems that were there. We arrived at one sentence: let's take a telephone and it works. Everything else we do around us must be focused on that issue. Whether we are going to get international gateways, whether we are going to license other players in the market, it is all should be about the concept of a telephone working. Similarly, if we are going to revive agriculture, the only way we are ever going to do it is when the farmer is profitable. When the farmer is profitable, we'll have enough food. When the farmer is profitable, we'll have enough for exports and so on. But no matter how many papers we write, no matter how many debates we have, no matter how much discussion we are going to have, unless and until the farmer looks at his balance sheet and says that income equals price times quantity, we are not going to succeed. So for me, therefore, when we look at the sphere, when we look at the entire agricultural space, then things that we do should go to that. You talked about the youth. Youth today, Gen Zs, millennials, and others, are about one thing if they are going to go to business. It's about profit. It's about making money. No youth is going to go to agriculture because we are urging them to go there. They are only going to go to agriculture if they are going to make money. And the only way they are going to make money is by taking the necessary steps that we have to make in order for agriculture to be responsive to profit making. Now, Mr. Chairman, this is very broad, and therefore you allow me space just to expand a little bit. There are many activities within the agricultural sector that we have to carry forward, that we have to do. For example, just to take youth as an example. In order for us to attract the youth into agriculture, youth have no land to grow food on. A lot of the young people don't have land. So we have to think broadly about how can we afford them land first. There is a lot of land, ADC and other organizations, private sector, land that is lying idle, that is not being used, that we can lease to these people. Now, in order for us to lease land to these people, we have got to make sure that the land, that the use of the land that they are getting is going to be profitable to them. Because that's why, in the first place, they are going to go for that idea. How are you going to do that? Our research organizations must ensure that we have done proper soil analysis. Our seed people must have the correct seeds so that people can plant seeds that germinate, seeds that produce the correct product. We have got to plant the right crops in the right places so that they can grow en masse and produce more per acre. So we have got to use the technology because youth are interested in technology. And also we have to define, when we say that the youth should be involved in agriculture, which part of agriculture are we talking about? Because it is not just about growing to grow crops. For example, tourism in agriculture is being involved in agriculture. You know, you travel all over the world and you see yourself being taken to places where they grow all sorts of things in other nations. We want people to come to Kenya also to see our agriculture. That's an area that can be attractive to the youth. There is fintech and agri-finance. These are the areas that the youth are going to be interested in. So in a nutshell, Mr. Chairman, the business of agriculture has got to be looked at from a profit and loss in order for us to make it worthwhile and in order for us to revive it. Agriculture for the youth must be made cool. It is too ordinary. It's too boring. Youth are not going to go there the way it is structured today. It's got to be something more exciting that involves technology, that involves new ways of doing things, that involves areas in agriculture that we have not quite spent our time on. Things like hydroponics, aquaponics. These are areas that they are going to look at. The use of technology means that they are going to introduce new things in agriculture that do not currently exist. What does that mean, therefore? It means that the training that we are going to engage in, working together with the ministries of education, we have to look at the training that we are giving the agricultural sector. the agricultural student. What are we training them in? The future of agriculture is going to be in technology. AI, for example, artificial intelligence, is going to play a very crucial role in the future of agriculture. And if that is the case, are we educating our people, our future farmers, enough to deal with that issue? They are doing it elsewhere. If you go across the world, they will be doing that. So the question is whether we are preparing ours to compete with the best in the world.
Thank you. Majority Leader, I will encourage you, nominee, to exercise some brevity in answering questions. You have 2 hours engagement with us.
I'm trying, Mr. Chairman. It's just the breadth of the question.
Yes, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, maybe I'll start the CS nominee from his response to Mr. Ura's affidavit in respect to your suitability for appointment based on your professional academic qualifications. And he responded by saying that the fundamental criteria for appointment to such a position is based on one's ability to provide effective leadership and service to the public. And in that regard, you say you have the requisite qualifications to serve as Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture, despite not having any training in agriculture. And probably you also didn't have any training in health when you served as Health Minister. But CS, in my view, you did well in terms of communicating, especially around the COVID time. You were on TV. In fact, people christened you the COVID CS. I would want to hear what exactly you intend to do, because, again, in my view, we have had a communication problem, and more so in the State Department for Livestock and also the State Department for Agriculture. You remember last year the issues that we had with subsidized fertilizer procurement and the communication that came around that issue. Towards the end of the year, we also had a similar problem. I had to withdraw a bill that came to Parliament from the State Department of Livestock, the Livestock Bill, largely on account of the disinformation that was being propelled in both mainstream and social media. And this bill is anchored on policies that are espoused by the government through the ministry. I would want to hear what you intend to do now as Cabinet Secretary. One, to provide that effective leadership within the ministry, to communicate effectively to the public what is contained in the bills that you will bring to Parliament, because Parliament tends, and in this case, my office of the Leader of Majority, we tend to take the flak from everybody, believing that all legislation that comes from government is authored by parliamentarians and the office of the Leader of Majority. So I want to hear first what you intend to do to ensure that there is effective leadership in terms of communication. And as I said, in my view, you have done well in your previous postings, whether it was in ICT or in health. To CS, I've also noted from your CV and the documents that have been submitted, as Cabinet Secretary in the past, you have served for 2 years in all the ministries you have served. Is it coincidence or fate? Because you are CS Health for 2 years, you are CS ICT again for 2 years. Are you going to be CS Livestock Agriculture for 2 years since you are being appointed in 2025? I don't know whether it's fate or by design. Lastly, you have spoken at length on the nexus between farming and the profit and loss for the farmer and what you would want to see in the ministry. We have also heard from government, especially from the president, that we have now, as a country, fixed our production side. I would want to hear, and again, based on your training as a student of commerce, what exactly do you intend to do to ensure that there is a proper nexus between the productivity that we are saying we have increased, whether it's sugar, whether it's maize, whether it's rice. How do you link that to markets? And bearing in mind that coffee, the coffee you are speaking about drying in your younger years, most of the marketing is not in the Ministry of Agriculture. It's in our State Department, in cooperatives, I think. Whether it is milk, again, you produce, the marketing is with someone else. Coffee you produce, tea you produce, marketing is done by someone else. How are you going to create that nexus to ensure that also the country benefits from your experience as a marketer and as a student of commerce to make farming profitable, not just for future farmers, but even for our current farmers, many of who probably are not as tech savvy as the younger generation. And I would really want, I was looking to hear when you spoke about the P&L, how you intend to get that nexus between the good productivity that we now have to making profits for farmers to make it profitable, because that's the only way you'll be able to sustain. This sector has been riddled by cartels, whether it is in the tea sector, coffee sector, milk sector, there are cartels all over. And we have seen in the past people come into this office, very good-looking people like yourself, with very good intentions, but they get swallowed by the cartels.
Thank you.
How do you intend to protect yourself from being swallowed by these coffee cartels, tea cartels, milk cartels?
Brevity.
Mr. Chairman, you'll agree that there is quite a bit to respond to here, but I'll try and be as brief as I can.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mheshimiwa. Let me start with the issue of communication, because I think that is what you laid emphasis on. I think the first thing to remember is that in my capacity, if I'm approved by this committee, in my capacity as a cabinet secretary, I am simply a cog. I'm simply part of a cog of people and stakeholders that must be involved in the decision-making processes that you have referred to.
You can't be part of a cog. You can be a cog in a wheel.
Yes.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed, Mr. Chairman. One of the cogs. That is what I am. And Mr. Chairman, the long and short of it is the following, that it is not possible to make progress in that area unless we work together with the stakeholders. We have got to have a consultative approach to these things. Cows belong to individuals. Maize in shambas belong to individuals. They don't belong to the government. You know, coffee in coffee farms belong to individuals. So any decision that we make has got to be made with those individuals who are the owners of the of whatever products and commodities that we are going to be discussing. That's number one. Number two is that they are experts in these areas. They are also experts who have been trained to make decisions in those areas. And I'll tie that up with what you said about COVID, the issues of COVID, which I'll come to on its own at some point if the chairman will allow. And to say the following, that part of the reason why there was so much necessity of communicating virtually every day to the people is the weighty issue that was at hand. You are talking about life and death of people. And therefore, you need to keep them abreast with any issue that is developing in relation to their own lives. Because that is what it came down to. Similar, and that's why we had a press conference virtually every day, whether it was made by myself or other players, other ministry officials. It was determined, we determined that that is the way we were going to handle communication to them. Now, to do so, we got the right information from the people who are technically qualified to give that information. We had epidemiologists, you know, led by one Professor Anzara, who informed us about the right thing to tell people and the information that people need in order for them to make their own decisions. So the first thing is that we have got to be consultative. We have got to make people, we have got to consult people. We have got to consult the owners. We have got to the owners of agriculture. We have got to consider the experts of agriculture so that as we make progress, we move together. We work together. If you take an example, and I mentioned coffee, even sugar. You know, you cannot make decisions about sugar unless we involve the person who is actually going out there growing sugar, you know, on day-to-day basis. The sugar actually belongs to him. And there is also obviously consultations with the other bodies. For example, this organization, the National Assembly and the Senate. There are institutions that are involved in what we are doing at the ministry. And you will remember, Mr. Chairman, that agriculture is essentially a devolved function. In Schedule 4 of the Constitution, there are the areas that are supposed to be handled by the county governments, and it divides it into areas that are also supposed to be handled by the national government. So we have to involve the stakeholders who are going to be largely, and to a large extent, the county governments. So in terms of communication, I want to be clear that we are going to establish a very robust, communication system that is going to be both in mainstream media as well as social media. And I know that, Mr. Chairman, the Honorable Leader of Majority spoke about the ills sometimes, the negatives that come. I think sometimes we have to agree that in this day and age in the democracy, we have got to take both the positives and the negatives, and they are going to keep coming anyway, and that is not going to change. So I think for me, what I would like to do is use the same social media, use the same mainstream media, work with the fourth estate to try and disseminate information as much as I can to the farming community. And it won't be the first time, because during the period you have referred to, during the COVID period, part of the key players in terms of dissemination of information and the buy-in to the activities of government was actually members of the fourth estate. They are the ones who assisted us to succeed. And I want to say that my intention is to continue to work with the fourth estate as openly and as transparently as I can. We will be criticized, and that's fine too, because oversight is part of their job. So I intend to keep very closely, to work very closely with them. The area of social media. Social media is an area that has come to both help us. It helps us a great deal. There is also the negativity in the social media. And I know that, Mr. Chairman, if one were to talk broadly and say leadership has been made that substantially harder, through social media. But part of the hardship hardship and headaches that one gets from social media is also part of the way that we can communicate more easily, to our people, because they are also on social media. And that which you cannot change, you might as well use, because we are not going to be able to change some of the communication channels that exist. And indeed, we can use them very positively for ourselves. Mr. Chairman, there was a nexus that the Honorable Leader of the Majority wanted me to explain, and that's the issue of the PLL and the production capacity that has clearly increased. It's a fantastic example of what I'm talking about. The reason why the production has increased is twofold. One is because of the good climates that we have fortunately experienced. But two, and to a large extent, is also subsidized fertilizers. It's part of the reason why this increase has come in almost all products, both cash crop and as well as food crops. There has been an increase. Now, when you increase production and you are able to save on post-harvest challenges, it means that the farmer gets this bigger quantity that he has got. But the market is huge. The market for these products is not just here. The market for both livestock as well as crops is both in Kenya and external. Information about the markets is what has largely been missing. And part of this is also the deployment of technology. Because now with a mobile app, you are able to tell where tomatoes have got better prices instantly. But this information is around somewhere, floating somewhere in the market. It's our responsibility as ministry to make sure that that information is available. You also alluded to the issue of the fact that the marketing aspect of most of those cash crops, the boards and everything, is in the Ministry of Cooperatives. That's fine too, because we work in a collective area. We have collective responsibility. Every ministry in government will automatically have to relate with another ministry in government. And it is not just the Ministry of Cooperatives that we have got to work with. We have got to work with the Ministry of Energy, for example. Right now we are waiting for the Ministry of Energy to connect to Kenani, to the Kenani leather park that the ministry is establishing. We are waiting for the Ministry of Water, to also connect water. So we will have to work collectively. We have to work together. Again, coming back to the example that you gave, if you look at the management of COVID-19, it was a whole government approach, whereas the central ministry was the Ministry of Health. The activities that were happening, keeping law and order, the Ministry of Health does not have any askaris. That is Interior that was assisting us in keeping order. The Ministry of Health does not have, is not in charge of matatus and so on. Yet, we are to contain even containment measures, included the transport sector. So we have to work with the CS for transport. Education is not part of health, but it was a huge, huge part of the activities on the Ministry of Health during the COVID period. That too simply illustrates that you need to work collectively with other ministries, and that forms part of collective responsibility.
Yes. Junet?
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. Chair, I wanted to ask
Which chair?
Chairman, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Chairman. Chairman, I want to ask the nominee.
I gave the latitude to your colleague. Now, muulize swali moja moja.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
One is a general question. Chairman, I want to remind the nominee, or to inform him that in the last 2.5 years, he will be the third Minister for Agriculture. There was one who came at the beginning, second one came, we vetted him, you are the third one we are vetting. If you are approved by this House to become the Minister for Agriculture. And the last one we vetted, I asked him a question. I told him, do you know what you're getting into? He told me, yes, I know. I want to ask you also, do you know what you're getting into that ministry? You need to tell me more what you think of that. The second issue is the people or the ministry concentrates so much on agriculture and normally forgets about livestock. And in many countries in the world, their GDP growth is even contributed much higher by livestock than agriculture. What do you think you will do in the livestock sector so that the GDP, the livestock sector can contribute to the GDP of the country? And what is your position on the vaccine that's being proposed to give to livestock in this country? What do you think it is? Or how will you implement it? Or what are your views on that thing?
Point of order.
Yes.
I think if you allowed 3 questions, because many of the questions, you will easily answer them with, many responses.
Yes, that's what I was going to do.
Okay.
Posing.
Thank you, Chairman, Speaker. To the nominee, Honorable Mutahi Kagwe. Following what Honorable Junet said, many people think that the Ministry of Agriculture is crops, forgetting the bigger, which is livestock. My question will be, what will you do, particularly the pastoralist people, who keep a lot of animals, but during let's say, drought or something like that, they lose all of them. What will you think, or what will you do, or what will you tell them to listen, that even before drought, for example, that you can buy all of these animals, and then give them money to wait until drought goes, then you bring number 2. You are going to be Minister of Agriculture. Where is agriculture? There's no agriculture in national level, in my view. If you look at also first schedule of the Constitution, agriculture is devolved. So when you are minister for who or for what at national level? Are you going to be marketing officer of agriculture, or what is it? And yet agriculture is at level. My proposal will be, or what I want to hear from you, what nexus or structure, legal structures or implementable structures that will be between you yourself and the counties. Because without counties government, without county people, agriculture will just be almost, at national level, it will be a talk show if you don't bring in counties in terms of implementation. Thank you, Chairman.
Nelson?
Thank you very much. Many commentators, Honorable Mutahi, believe that you did actually handle the COVID-19 quite brilliantly. But however, there are questions and or misappropriation, massive theft at that time, particularly in Kemsa. There are cases that have been handled by this House, particularly by the Parliamentary Accounts Committee, and I just want to draw your attention to a few of them. Number one is a question on expenditure of 2 billion on budgeted items in breach of regulation in 2015. Rather, Regulation 2015 requiring public officers to act in the government's interest to be aware on essentials of vote control process. There's also single sourcing of COVID masks supplied contrary to Section 69(2) of the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act. I will not highlight all of them, but most importantly also was the acquisition, nominee on vaccines. It is believed that you failed to account on the procurement of 1.6 billion worth of vaccines, and it is still a subject of investigation by this House. What do you have to say about all that was said at that time, that there was a lot of misappropriation in Kemsa? Number two, I come from an area which predominantly grows tea, and I want to hear, and I will like to read so that I don't misadventure, that tea prices in Mombasa auction were on a downward trend in 2022, forcing the government to establish a minimum reserve price of USD 2.6 for the teas from the east of the rift and the USD 2.4 for teas from the west of the rift. This initiative was aimed at stabilizing the market and addressing the declining tea prices at the Mombasa auction. However, the current pricing structure has resulted in several millions of teas being unsold, thus resulting in stagnating warehouses and facilities. What strategies will you implement to alleviate the situation? Additionally, is government interference in this manner necessary in a free market, and how can it be balanced to ensure market stability without causing adverse effects? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable nominee, I sit in a Committee of Environment and Forestry, where climate change is a huge topic. And most of the time, whenever we go around, over and above the environmental issues, farmers do ask about this climate change, which affects agriculture, be it crop, be it livestock, and things like that. And the issue that always comes is that they don't have any information as to, initially we used to know Kenya, by around February, you start preparing your land for purposes of planting and things like that. But it is no longer. So what policy are you going to put in place to try and address the climate change issue, which is affecting agriculture? And lastly, Chair, it's about somebody has just asked me from the constituency regarding what is your view on this livestock vaccination, the debate that is going on. What is your view? Thank you, Chair.
Answer those from
Thank you.
Honorable Junet down to Gikaria.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me start by answering the Honorable Junet's question, which relates also to one that had been asked by the majority leader about the 2 to 3 years, which because they are kind of the same, because I'm the third minister. First of all, of course, is to say that I've been happy to serve, no matter how the period. You're happy to serve, because the idea is to make a difference. And sometimes it is not how the length of time that you do a job in, it is what you put into the time that you have got that you can make a difference in. I have no idea why 2 years into government, I was invited by the 3 previous, including the current president, because obviously they are appointing authorities. But I want to answer your question, and perhaps related to also to Honorable Koeshi's question. You asked me whether I know what I'm getting myself into. And from the questions that you have heard from Honorable Koesh, yes, I can relate to your question and what you are asking. regarding the prices and so on. Mr. Chairman, you will remember that one day in 2020, I stood outside Afia House, and it is on record even in the media. I pointed at Afia House, and I said that there are many cartels in this building. You know, I said it myself. It was not said by other people. I am the one who said it sitting in there. So as I went into the ministry, I was quite aware that there are cartels. And I'm quite aware that even this one, there are cartels in it. That's the first thing. The second thing is to say that cartels fight back. You know, cartels will fight back. And some of the stuff that you're hearing coming out is a question of cartels fighting back. Not only would I expect them to fight me back once you start fighting them, in fact, I'm ready for the battle because I know the battle is going to come. And the cartels will definitely fight back. But I want to say that irrespective of the war that is clearly going to be there, there are sufficient people in Kenya. There are enough people in the ministry, there are enough people in this parliament, there are enough people in Kenyans out there who are going to be extremely supportive in that fight. You know, I am confident about that. And your job in this house, as you oversight, as you make sure that you oversight, is also to make sure that you assist us also, you know, in those battles with cartels, that you'll obviously come and fight back so that they can take. In the area of COVID, for example, and I pointed it out, is that as we started the restructuring of KEMSA, and I want to say to Honorable Koech that, you know, it is very difficult for us to remember back at the crisis that we had in 2019, and as particularly after the 12th of March of 2020, when the pandemic was actually declared globally. Mr. Chairman, we were faced by a severe situation. What we are calling, what today sells for nothing, which is a mask for your face, was so rare that people were willing in the streets of Nairobi to pay 3,000, 5,000 shillings for a mask, which is now free in most places and you can take. So when people say, and part of the big question regarding that period and part of the COVID billionaire issues and so on that we have had to do with the prices of issues, the prices of goods, the prices of commodities and health, and what was necessary to contain this disease in our country. Mr. Speaker, I remember appearing in this house to explain these issues and to say at that time in 2020, for example, we were looking for anybody who could give us a mask. And yes, I am the first person to admit that it wasn't an opportune time, that indeed there was abuse of process in KEMSA and other procuring agencies at that time, and not just in the Ministry of Health, but widely. But I think the major concern, the major interest at the time, and I can give you one clear example. For instance, the PPEs. We were looking for protection gear for our doctors and nurses. We didn't have any. A PPE could easily sell for 15,000 shillings, 9,000 shillings, etc. And I can tell you, Honorable Koech, that if they came at 20,000 shillings, we would have bought them. Because it's a question of, are you going to wait or are you going to buy at whatever price to save lives? Money almost begins to take a secondary position when it comes to life and death. And that is what it was. But we are also the same people who worked on it. What steps did we take? I called all the manufacturers of the materials. I sat outside my office with a bottle of water, testing materials to see whether they could be able to be used for PPEs with the experts in the Ministry of Health. And consequent to that, we were able to use our own people in Shona, in Athi River, in Nakuru. We were able to use our own people to produce the same materials at a quarter of the price. And now today, the same PPEs can be produced in our country at 2,000 shillings or less than 2,000 shillings. So it wasn't an appropriate time. A lot of mistakes were made, and I'll tell you that and confirm that indeed there were mistakes made. But I would also like to say that at the prices that I was saying, and this is what I explained to Parliament, and I challenged this House, at the time that we were buying PPEs at, say, 9,000 shillings, I said I would like somebody to show me any place where the PPE was selling at less than that price. And I remember, Mr. Chairman, going to Aga Khan Hospital, going to Nairobi Hospital. Everybody was desperate and the prices were crazy all over the town. It wasn't that the Ministry of Health was buying those items at a higher price than the rest of the world or the rest of the country. We were buying it at the market prices at that time. And this is something that I have explained, at length. Mr. Chairman, the handling of COVID-19 at that time was such a nightmare. It was such a nightmare that the cost to people, the cost of lives, every day we would wake up to be told that 10,000 people are being buried in New York. The Italian government has given up and surrendered, that everybody is dying. In South America, people are being dragged out of houses and being burnt outside, cremated outside their own houses. So it wasn't a time that people were making very, very rational decisions. It was a desperate period, but we did what we had to do. And Kenya, by the way, is one of the countries that got praised because of the work that they did. And Mr. Chairman, I will say this. I am prepared to do, I take responsibility, and I did. And I said everything that happened that was not correct in my ministry, and throughout that COVID period, we must take responsibility because it was there. The negatives, I take responsibility. The positives, I give credit to the team that was working at the ministry. All the members of the National Emergency Response Committee, of which I chaired, that included members of the Defense Forces, members of all ministries that were involved. We took collective decisions. In the issue of vaccines, we took collective decisions for vaccines. And the whole issue of the expenditure on vaccines, Mr. Chairman, is actually exaggerated. Because 90% of the vaccines that we actually used in Kenya were donated. There were donations from the United States government, from the World Health Organization, from European governments. Yes, they were of a great value, and they were valued at a lot of money, but they were free. We got a lot of those things for free. We didn't actually buy a lot of those ones. The ones that we bought, the ones that we ordered from Johnson & Johnson in South Africa. In fact, the quantity that we were supposed to get, we never even utilized in full, because by the time we had developed immunity and stopped the delivery of. So there were several issues that one can speak about. And as for KEMSA, it is true. When I said that there are cartels out there, it was true. And what did we do? What did I do as minister? You will remember, Mr. Chairman, that we carried out a complete re-engineering of KEMSA. Change of staff, restructuring the organization, at least in the time when I was there. So we did take action about it. And I'm the one who invited the investigating authorities to come and go through it so that we can see how we can change the entire structure to do a better job in a crisis like that. For me, Mr. Chairman, what I say is that I hope, because there will be another pandemic, it is not a question of whether it will be there. It's not a question of if it will come. Looking at the global situation today, it is very likely that we are going to get some zoonotic and other pathogens that will cause pandemics in the future. And it's a question of being prepared for it and hope to God that there will be somebody sitting in those offices where he or she will have to make some very difficult decisions, notwithstanding the fact that eventually they could be verified for those decisions. But I hope to God they will have the guts to go on anyway and save lives. Mr. Chairman, on the issue of tea, and I know that this is an issue because of the tea that is actually lying in Mombasa, at the Mombasa auction. Mr. Chairman, I know that my predecessor had set a committee to deal with the issue of tea, and I want to say that I agree with those people who are saying that there is an interference of businesses that governments can go to a length to do and mess the process in the first place. So there is a degree of regulation that you want to carry out, and indeed we will carry out some regulation, but the regulation will be to improve the market. Our job, as you asked about what is the ministry going itself doing, given the fact that it is a Schedule 4 divides it amongst both the county governments and the national government. I think if you look at Schedule 4, you'll see that the breadth of involvement of the national government is quite large. And if you are involved in the policy, if you are involved in research, if you are involved in financing, if you are involved in creating markets for these products, then you will have to work, as you rightly said, in the joint committee of both the county governments and the national government. Again, I would like to confirm that this is not the first time I'm going to do this. During the COVID period or during my days as Cabinet Secretary for Health, that's what we did. We had constant communication. We had several meetings with the CECs for health. And I can tell you, Mr. Chairman, we even managed to bring in to the ministry the CECs for health to be part of the teams in the Ministry of Health at headquarters, so that you can create the linkages between the county governments and the national and the national government. So part of the price stabilization is to make sure that we are opening new markets. You know that our biggest competitors in the tea sector is China and India, and they have got varieties of tea that they produce. But we must also ensure something else, and this is where the regulatory framework comes in. We must make sure that even as we talk about the prices, we talk about the quality of tea that we are producing. We must ensure that we have got a minimum regulated quality of tea that can be called the Kenya tea. Because unless we do that, our tea is famous all over the world because of quality, not because of the quantity. So we must ensure that we preserve and secure the quality of our tea as much as we can, even as we open new markets for it. Mr. Chairman, yeah, sorry.
No, touch on overemphasis on crops as opposed to livestock.
I was getting there, Mr. Chairman.
And then climate change.
Yeah.
So that we go to other questions.
I was getting there, Mr. Chairman. I think the honorable member said that livestock has got the capability and possibility of actually becoming a bigger industry, and that is true. Because if you look at countries like Ethiopia, our neighbors out here, the leather industry in Ethiopia is huge. But again, Mr. Chairman, we must look at the livestock farming in its holistic form. Because when we talk about the animals that are grazing, we have to go back to that farmer. And I said earlier, and I go back to it, we have got to make sure that that farmer is earning his bit. Part of the measures that we must take, especially in the pastoralist community, is education and extension farming, extension livestock experts. They must talk to our livestock grazers and our livestock keepers and the breeders themselves. Because part of the way that we can develop the leather industry is it comes back all the way to the skin that the animal is walking in. Because that is where the quality of the leather first starts. For example, if you have got barbed wire in the compound and a cow grazes along the barbed wire and tears just a little bit on its skin, that leather is already affected. It is as complicated as that. Mr. Speaker, you'll find that the leather that we are producing in terms of quality is second and third grade. So we have got to go back to the farmer and say, as you keep the cow, since you want to make money, make sure that the skin, the hides and skins are taken care of. We must go all the way to the guys who are not just feeding the cows. What feedstuffs are we giving these cows? And you'll find that when we are looking at a basic cow for export, 200 kilos is the average weight of our cows. Out there, they are looking for 350 kilograms cows. So in terms of meat, in terms of hides and skins, it's an area that we need to work on and improve. And we need to work with the pastoralist community. We must sit together and work on those ideas that are there, because there is nothing very, very new. They know it. Now, when it comes to the leather industry, the formation of the leather park in Machakos is a huge development for us. It's a big thing. And so we must make use of it. This is a time when we can get the Gushis of this world, coming here so that we can make proper leather. The affluent plant, which has already been constructed, is actually the biggest single contribution in terms of the leather industry that we want to develop. And I'll be there, and I'll make sure that the plant is complete, and also the engagement with the pastoralists as well as other livestock farmers, is complete and engaged. Mr. Chairman, I also want to talk about the policy on insurance, because I think it's crucial. We must make sure that our farmers, the pastoralists, have insurance for cattle. Because if they do not have insurance, and I have been there at one time, I remember distinctly, Mr. Chairman, going to Mandela at one time, trying to get the farmers to agree to sell their cows, because